السلام علیکم بینندگان گرامی. امیدوارم که در هر نقطه دنیا باشین خوش و آرام باشین. خوش آمدین در برنامه ما صدای حق تلویزیون. Welcome to our regularly scheduled programming this week. It is September 20th, 2020. تاریخ امروز است 20 سپتامبر 2020. امروز بخیر راجع به انتخابات صحبت میکنیم و یک میمان بسیار خاص داریم. We have a very, very special guest today that we will be interviewing with regards to the importance of voting. And as we know, this is, I keep saying this over and over again all over social media, arguably the most important election of modern day history. I ask that you really listen carefully today to what's being said and to really try, if you've never voted before in your entire life, this is going to be your year. This is going to be the year that you're going to make a very big difference. بسیار امسال سال مهم است و خیلی شما را تشویق میکنم که رای بدین و بسیار انتخابات مهم است. شما بهتر میفهمین که در این 4 سال چی موضوعات پیر شده و بازم بسیار یک میمان گرامی داریم. انشالله بایوشان براتون میخوانم. باز بخیر شروع میکنیم. So I just wanted to give a very brief bio on Haris Tarin, who is joining us today and who is given so graciously of his time. Haris Tarin is a senior policy advisor at the Department of Homeland Security, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. He previously served as the director of the Washington, D.C. office of the Muslim Public Affairs, or MPAC. In both capacities, he has engaged and advised various agencies, including the White House, Departments of Justice, State and Homeland Security, and congressional offices on Capitol Hill. He's produced over 30 policy papers focusing on issues including national security, civil rights, civil liberties, religious freedom, immigration, and civic engagement. A regular on news television programs including CNN, BBC, Fox News, and MSNBC. He also writes regularly in national and international publications like the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Christian Science Monitor, and Al Jazeera. He was among 3 leading young Americans called by President Obama in a one-of-a-kind discussion on public policy issues. The president met on several occasions with Mr. Tarin, specifically to discuss policies pertaining to national security, ideological violence, the American Muslim community, and civic engagement. Haris Tarin was also a Cambridge Fellow and a Georgetown Fellow. He is the author of Intro to Muslim America and co-author of Rethinking the Red Line, Free Speech, Religious Freedom, and Social Change. ماشاءالله نام خدا کاش که ما میتونستم کل زیره داری ترجمانی میتونستم بکنم اما متاسفانه که متولد از اینجا هستم و داری ما خیلی ضعیف است اما بعضم بسیار کوشش میکنیم که هم داری امروز صحبت کنیم هم در فارسی. آرش جان بسیار افتخار ما هستی و خیلی خوش هستیم که شما امی کارا رو پیش بردین و کمک کردین حکومت دولت امریکا را و امروز هم بسیار خوش آمدین در برنامه ما.
بسیار تشکر فرشته جان. It's my pleasure and my honor to be here. بسیار مهربان هستین and you're too kind. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much. You're being very humble. We really appreciate all the contributions you've made to, especially an Afghan American who is battling 2 different identities and has grown up in this country, trying, as a refugee. It's incredibly important and inspirational, the work that you've done. So we words can't really put into play what you've done for us. And again, we really appreciate it. Arishtan, if you don't mind, we're going to be asking you some questions with regards to the upcoming election. Thank you so much. And we wanted to start with, mashallah, you have this extremely important role. And we wanted to know, why is it important for Afghan Americans to hold positions such as yourself and similar departments in the U.S. government. Yeah.
تشکر فرشته جان. First of all, thank you so much. بسیار زیاد تشکر از شما و صدای حق برای این موقع. راستی که امسال بسیار یک سال مهم است و این انتخابات بسیار مهم است. This election is, as you stated earlier, is probably one of the most critical elections in modern history and will determine the future of not only America, but determine the future of how the world sees America, engages America, and the leadership role that America has played in the world, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but regardless, it has been a role that has been important, and this election will determine how that moves forward. So, I think it's timely, it's important, and the reason it's important that this election is not only this election, but being involved civically and also being in positions of government, being in positions of influence in the U.S. is because we are part of society, whether we consciously believe it or we don't, or we consciously feel it or we don't. We are contributing members of society. كل ما tax میتیم. در امریکا کلگی هیچ کس از tax گرفتن نمیتونه. So we all pay taxes, and our tax dollars are spent by the government, and that's not only at the what we say the federal level, by the U.S. President and Congress and Senate, magar at the local level as well. The local level, we give taxes. A lot of us own homes, so we give property taxes. A lot of us run businesses, and we give taxes on our businesses. And so, if we are actually giving to the society, then it's really important that we are in positions where we can help make decisions about where our money and our influence go. So, for example, at the very local level, because everybody talks about کاری که درباره انتخابات رئیس جمهور گپ میزنه هر 4 سال که مهم است. راستی انتخابات رئیس جمهور مهم است، مگر انتخابات یک شهرواری هم بسیار مهم است. انتخابات یک گورنر یک استیت در امریکا بسیار مهم است. So those are extremely important elections as well. A mayor determines how our kids receive education. A school board, what we have school boards around this country, all those are elected. School board is one of the most important places where people at the local level can have influence. And they learn and they engage the curriculum. School boards and the local and state level, they're the ones that actually determine the curriculum. The کدام subject focus سرشان می باشه. So these are things that happen at the local level, and so if we as Afghan Americans, as minorities in America, as American Muslims, if we are not involved, whether at the federal level, at the state level, or at the local level, then our voices, so what we're doing is we're contributing to the system. ما system taxای خود میتیم، پیسه خود میتیم، مگر influence خود بر system نمیتیم. And value و principle خود بر system نمیتیم. And that's a problem, because if we don't contribute, if we don't give our values and our principles and our engagement to the system, پیسه از ما میگیرن، مگر صدای یک کس دیگه the system زیادتر میباشه. So there's a very famous saying of Malcolm X. Not many people know Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz in terms of who said this, but there's a famous saying by Malcolm X. He says, if you're not at the table, if you're not around a table, اگر در سر میز نیستین, then you're on the menu. خذ المنيو ما واش. So if you're not at the table, if you're not helping make your decisions, if you're not helping make decisions, you are on the menu. That means people are talking about you, people are doing things to you, people are making decisions about you, and you have no place around the table. And سيستك رستي amaze if you I get down amaze nabashi, I get down amaze, I get that conversation civic engagement and political engagement nabashim يكاس دقا برما قاعد ميزنا يكاس دقا صداي خذ برما بلان ميكنا وجات وقت those people don't have our best interests at heart. So it's important that we understand, at least for me, since I was young, when I read that quote of Malcolm X, that was very inspiring to me because it said, if I'm not around the table, my seat is not always going to be the same size as someone else's seat. The dowry means chowki astak, magar chowki ma meshak ekzal khortar basha. Chowki white Americans ya kalantar astak. Magar nonetheless, I have to continue to increase the size of my chair around the table because then I can increase the size of my influence. So it's really important that we are involved, whether at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. America has different levels of governance and government. And so if we're not involved there, and if we're not in these positions, someone else will be.
Absolutely, Arishan, and thank you so much for that reply. You know, it's interesting when you were talking about different levels of government, it came to mind that, you know, as Afghans, you know, we don't always feel like we're a part of something, or we don't always feel like we belong to something. But you know what? This is our country. This is our country. This is our government. This is our school system. These are our tax dollars going to very, very important things. بعض وقت ما افغانان زنده باشیم همیشه شکایت میگیم که چرا مثلا در منطقه ما اینی اشاره 3 ماه که کار نمیده، یا مثلا این مکتب اولاد خود رایی میکنم پس میایه هیچ وقت موفق نمیشه در یک کاره. شکایت کردن ماشاءالله زنده باشیم بسیار خوب یاد داریم و دقیقا دمی نوک زبان ماست که لیست نشته کنیم و بگوییم که غلط است غلط است غلط است. اما چی میکنیم؟ باید است که یک ذره خود شور بدیم. We got to shake it up, guys. We really got to shake it up. We have lists of complaints. You know, I love Afghans. I'm Afghan first before I'm anything else, Muslim and Afghan. But in the same token, we always have lists of complaints, lists of grievances. You know, remember that this is our country, this is our government, this is our tax dollars. We need to do our job, and to vote is not that difficult. And like Arishan just mentioned, you know, if you have two choices: either you're going to be a part of this process of lawmaking, or you're going to sit back and allow your money to go and your voice not to be heard. Okay.
Yeah, so we're amazing people. مگر ما در صحبت کردن بسیار عالیستیم. درباره هر چیز صحبت میکنیم و درباره هر چیز یک اپینین داریم. درباره سیاست، درباره هر چیز که بگوین یک فکر داریم و صحبت نامخدا زیاد میکنیم. مگر یگان نفر راستی در امریکا، در افغانستان و در کل دنیا یک ذره عمل ما یک کمک از صحبت کردن ما کده پستر استک. And I think that needs to change. And of course, we're seeing amazing work happen all over the place, but we need to be a community. And I think this is what, from my experience working with minority communities, working in advocacy and civil rights, the communities that take responsibility and shoulder responsibility and speak less and do more are communities who are generally much more influential and successful. And so for us as Afghan Americans, it's extremely important, or Muslim Americans, or you know, there's so many identities that we have. We don't have just one identity. ما در افغانستان تولد شدیم مگر در امریکا کلان شدیم. And I'm proud of both of those. I'm proud of my Afghan identity, my American identity. I'm also another part of my identity for me specifically is my American Muslim identity that shaped a lot of my advocacy work. So we as human beings, we have multiple identities that we will focus on in different parts of our lives. We focus on something else. But Kalan Shalem, we focus on another part of our identity. That is part of the ups and downs of being a human and going through this process. But I think the most important part is regardless of how you identify, is put in work. Make sure that we're not only thinking of ourselves. A lot of times, and this is part of the challenge of immigrant communities. A lot of immigrant communities, they come to this country. Amerikanian, awalin cheez kme khaim bukran, stability. Because they've lost everything. I mean, you can't blame it. You can't blame them. Most of our families who came to this country, they had so much and they lost it overnight. So when they come to America, they want stability, financial stability. They don't want to be involved in politics as much because they were like, politics is what made us leave our homeland. Politics is what actually made our lives worse. So as Afghanistan, as siyasat madari Afghanistan برایم امریکا بیایم دیگه سیاست خدا غرق کنیم. And that's how a lot of people think. But unfortunately, as someone very smart, one of my mentors used to tell me, he used to say, there's nothing in life that's not political. Everything, unfortunately, that's the case. Everything in life has politics involved in it. And so from how the roads that I drive my car on to the access that I have for my healthcare, to what my children learn, is all encompassed in politics. And so if we're not involved at some level and engaged, that is difficult. But I will say, we have to have the institutions for that to actually happen. We have to have the institutions to make sure that they guide people and facilitate for people to get involved. In America, every community that has been successful, minority community that has been successful, has had strong organizations and institutions. If we don't have those institutions in place, then it's harder for us to actually engage and have an impact on the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. Thank you, Arishan, for that. و همچنان آرشان بسیار یک چیز مهم گفت. میخواستم که امیرم یک برنامه دیگه ما یاد کردیم که بعضا افغانایی که ما که اینجا آمدن، مادرای ما، پدرای ما، فامیلای ما و اینجا زندگی خود از صفر شروع کردن، قهرمان هستن. Right? They're heroes, they're champions. So I don't want to undermine that, and I don't by any means want to make, demean that. It was about survival and resettlement and assimilating to a new country, a new system, a new process, but coming in with this ideology of, decades of war, constant government change, a lot of political issues back home in Afghanistan. So of course we're going to have this, we're going to come into this country with this mentality that, paranoia or, fear. So that's very normal. And that's okay. And I think that, the point of this and the reason why we're doing this is because we want to reverse that, right? مطلب ما است، هدف ما است امروز که ما شما واقعا از یک ملت و یک رژیم بسیار مشکل آمدیم و این امیال وظیفه ما است که اوجا را درک کردیم، اینجا آمدیم زندگی نو جور کردیم، اساسا در پراسش و سیستمش خود داخل کنیم. و امروز آرشان بخیر برای ما میگه که چرا مهم است که آدم رای بده در این مملکت و امی انتخابات پراسه سیستمی که در امریکا هست چی رقم می باشه. So, again, everybody, we're very, very new new immigrants, right? Very, very new, only been here for 40, 50 years. You know, some Afghans have been here pre-war, some during the war. So I mean, I think that with respect to that, it's still important, and it's still important to kind of reverse that mentality. And but how can you reverse a mentality when you're not 100% clear on what you're getting yourself into? And the point of this show today, and the point of this message, and what Artist John is going to be explaining now, is the actual process of the election and how do elections work. And of course, there's federal elections, there's local, there's state, there's federal, there's all different governments. And today we won't have enough time to go through the specifics of every single type, but just a general overview on how your vote works. That would be awesome, Audishan, if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, so پیشی که درباره پروسس الکشنز گپ بزنم میخواستم یک کمک درباره مهمیت امی خود انتخابات رای دادن الکشنز در امریکا یک کمک گپ بزنم. از خاطر در تاریخ امریکا مردمای بدن که نتونستن که رای بدن از شروع امریکا کسایی بدن زنا African Americans امریکای سیاه and many other groups as well Native Americans یا برای رای دادن
حق نداشتن
بله
حق نداشتن
حق نداشتن مگر they fought for their right to vote. So it's important to talk about the issue of voting itself before even the process, because I think a lot of people, and especially, and this is a problem for all Americans, this is not just a problem for immigrant Americans. About 40 to 45% of Americans vote in this country. Of the developed world, of the democratic world, America is one of the least, Americans are one of the least groups of participants in their elections. Wow. And so that tells you that America itself, خود أمريكا انتخابات ورای دادن وقد مهم نمیبینن. And that is a problem. از خاطر اساس democracy. Assault of democracy is participation, is individuals being involved. Agar the assault democracy خود مردم engage نکنه, we are going to actually have influences from outside and influences that don't seek the benefit of the majority of people in that system. So we have a challenge of all Americans not participating enough in electoral process. The first thing that I will say about elections is that elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. And if we learned anything from 2016, is that not all parties are the same. Not all candidates are the same. There are ideological differences. We may think they're the same. The news sometimes may make us feel that they're the same, but they're not the same. And there's a cynical part of us. We think, oh, کلگیشان یک چیز هستک، ریپابلیکن ها یک چیز است، دموکرات ها کلشان یک چیز هستک، بینشان هیچ فرق نیست. So we tend to have this approach. Sometimes that's true in certain areas. There's not a lot of differences in certain candidates and parties, but the majority of the time, that is not true. And we see that in 2016, where that saying, the family, the communities, هیچ فرق بین از این دو نفر نیستک. اردوش یک چیز است. دموکراتا و ریپابلیکانا، کلینتون و ترامپ کلشان یک چیز است. That's not the case. That's not the case. و طی 4 سال دیدیم that was not true. We went through things like the Muslim ban, the Muslim ban, which limited the immigration and entry of Muslims from certain countries around the world. We've seen issues like immigration that has impacted not only our communities, but the Latino community and so many others. So elections have consequences. Raidadan has consequences. And so that's the first lesson that I think everyone should know about the system, is that whether at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, the 3 levels in the American system, elections have consequences. The second thing that's important to know about the history of elections and voting in America is that not everyone had the right to vote, but everyone has fought to vote. And that's extremely important. Not everyone has the right to vote, had the right to vote, but everyone has fought. Women were not allowed to vote in this country until the 1920s. African Americans really, until today, have so many blocks in front of them and so many obstacles in front of them from being able to actually go and vote. And that's the other challenge, is until today, there are people trying to minimize the number of voters in the system. So there's laws, there's policies at the federal and especially at the state level trying to limit the number of people who vote. And this is part of how you kind of control people and people's votes and their voices. And so women have fought to obtain the right to vote in this country. African Americans, minority communities, everyone has fought. So that means we have monadara. She's like ke raidadan, intikhabat, wa democracy. She's a muhim asparama. And that's how we make our voices heard. There's people who give their lives. There's to have a say in the government, even though it's an imperfect system. Systemic idarim is an imperfect system. There's no system that is perfect here at the local, state, or federal level, but we can have impact on it. So I will say that before even talking about the system of voting in this country, because I think not enough of us really understand what is at stake when we talk about voting.
بسیار خیلی مهم است که آدم متوجه شود گپ آرشجانه که پیش از اینکه ما راجع به فرانسه گپ بزنیم متوجه شویم که اصلا پیش از اینکه همگی حق زیر نداشتن که رای بدن. Right? So that you bring up such an incredible point that we often take this for granted, that we live in a democratic system and that we live in a country in which so many people have given up and sacrificed so much, including some people their own lives, to have this right. So that within itself, to be able to exercise that right is so incredibly essential. So thank you for that. That's incredibly important.
It is. It's an honor for a lot of people. I mean, Afghanistan, مردم بساطا دلاین استاد میشن یگان دفعه سرشان بم میآید و violence سرشان میآید مگر افتخار میکنن که کلک خدا بلند میکنن که من امروز رای دادم صدای ما یکش شنیده. And that takes a lot, and so representative government که ما حکومت ما صدای ما میشنوه, that's such an important thing for a lot of people, and so that's extremely important. So that's the beginning. Now, if we go into the actual system of voting, what's important for us to really think about is that there are layers to voting in America. بیشتر با فکر میکنیم که اب 4 سال بعد یک رای ما میتم برای رئیس جمهور و بس دیگه رای ما کار ما خلاص شد، responsibility ما خلاص شد، دیگه ما برای 4 سال دیگه آرام خانه میشینم and that's it. That is not the way to look at voting and the electoral process. راستی انتخابات رئیس جمهوری بسیار مهم است. در 2016 رو دیدیم. مگر انتخابات local از شهروالی، از governor، از city council, senate, congress یا مهم است. So در امریکا که است layered voting است and layered democratic and electoral system exists. What's important to understand is that okay, we can vote every 4 years. We'll vote for the presidency, which is important. But there's so many other elections that impact our lives. And I'll give you just a brief example of one thing that impacts our lives, but we don't really even think about, right? We spoke a little bit earlier about school boards. The majority of Afghan American children go to public schools in America. So their education is impacted by the decision of a small school board that cities have, towns have, counties have, that make decisions about how much money that school gets, about what type of education they receive, what textbooks they actually read, what is in those textbooks. These are all decisions made by the school boards with the help of the state. But generally, the school boards have that decision. But how important is that my children, awladim, who are the most precious thing to me, are going to be taught and educated, and their education will be impacted by a few people who are elected maybe by a few hundred votes. That's the level of impact that elections have. And then if you think about that at the national level, it's even more. When you vote for a president, when you vote for a senator, when you vote for a member of Congress, those impacts increase larger and larger. So America has a layered democratic system, right? It's we have the federal government, we have the state government, we have local governments, we have counties, and they're all a good portion of them are elected, whether it's the judicial system. So many people also don't know that there are many judges in America that get elected. There are sheriffs. A lot of people think that sheriffs are appointed. Many sheriffs in America are elected. So it's a system, it's a layered system. Unfortunately, it's a complicated system at times. But what's important for us is to determine how I can get involved. It's also good because some people get overwhelmed because there's so much, right? Yeah. So it's good to identify, okay, Mamsal, I'm going to vote for the presidency, for my senators, for my member of Congress, but I'm going to inform myself. I will understand those issues. I will understand what is driving these people to run, what's good for me, what's not good for me. What have they said about Afghan Americans? What have they said about minorities? What have they said about American Muslims? How is the vote that I'm going to give to this individual, how will it impact my life? How will it impact my life?
Absolutely. Wonderful. So thank you for that input. So there's a lot of things that are, obviously involved in voting and elections. And thank you for explaining that this is it's more complicated than meets the eye. But, again, you can dissect it and you can pick and choose as to what you want to do on a yearly basis or bi-yearly or however which way your election system is, working at the time. بازم تشکر که شما ما رو متوجه ساختین که چند لا داره لا بلا آدم میتونه که ببینه که دولت و حکومت ما چی رقم کار میداد و یک سوال دارم مثلا زیاد افغانا از پیش ما میپرسن یگان نفر راجع به یگان چیزای سیاست که صحبت میکنیم مخصوصا در کلاینت های ما همیشه مرا میگه که چی فایده که من رای بتم برای رئیس جمهور بیازو نو الکترال electoral college hasta wa uči monometa uči tasir da rabiozu raima kornamita. So basically, I have a lot of clients that I see um, that are not necessarily used to the system in which we are brought up in our necessarily the way that the American voting system works. And they'll say, you know what, why does my vote count anyway? There's this thing I heard about, it's called the Electoral College. And due to the Electoral College, my vote doesn't really count. So why should I even make the effort? So if you could kindly address that, that would be amazing.
So uh, there's truth to that, and there's also a lot of myths and misconceptions surrounding the Electoral College.
Mm-hmm.
The Electoral College is one of the things that's actually in the Constitution of the United States. وقت America was established, they were trying to find a way to actually, in a manner that because this was all negotiations, right? All of there were so many different states, they had different interests. So to negotiate all those interests and to get people together and to accept one system, you had to give and take. The Electoral College it's not too complicated. It's not as complicated as people make it out to be.
Okay.
And there's a debate now whether the Electoral College is outdated because it was created for the time of the establishment of the Constitution, and when there was the context was very different. So the Electoral College, a college is basically a group of people that get together that have one task. So electoral, a group of people who get together to address the elections. That is the Electoral College. And what they were tasked to do is each state has a number of Electoral College votes based on the population. So, for instance, California has the largest number of electoral votes because they have the largest population. Texas, New York, the larger states have a larger number of the Electoral College votes. These votes are supposed to represent the will of the people. So in most states, in 48 states actually, the Electoral College goes to the candidate that the majority of people voted for. So for instance, in California, if they vote for Joe Biden, all of California's 55 electoral votes goes to Joe Biden. If Florida votes for Donald Trump, all of Florida's Electoral College votes go to Donald Trump. There's only 2 states that split based on the percentage that each candidate gets, but all the other states. And so, no, your voice does count. The Electoral College is just a formal representation in the majority of states of the will of the people. So if enough people vote, then those Electoral College numbers will go to the candidate. Now, the difference is, so a candidate needs 270 out of over 500 Electoral College votes. They need 270 to become the president. And so when you reach that number of 270, you then become the president of the United States. The problem is, because the country has changed, because the numbers have grown, we've evolved, certain states have a lot more influence and impact on the country. Some of the smaller states have a larger influence now. So you can have 30, 40 million people who live in California. They have a certain number of numbers, but those numbers don't necessarily reflect what is actually happening in the Electoral College. So for instance, a person can be elected president, but not get the majority of votes because they get the electoral state. The states is what determines it. So for instance, that's what happened in 2016. Hillary Clinton had 3 more million votes than Donald Trump, but he still became the president because those votes were from states mainly that already had voted, were going to vote for her, and their electoral college numbers were less impactful than like a state, for instance, the swing state like Ohio. So it's not a complicated system. And just because there is electoral college, that doesn't mean that my vote doesn't count. If enough people vote for a candidate, their college goes to that candidate. So there's myths around it that, oh, it's all determined. It's not all determined. It just reflects the number of people that voted for that person from the state. And because it is a formal process that was established in the Constitution.
So آرشتان هم یاد گفتن که چون electoral college رقمی که سیستمش کار میته state ما در state های امریکا نسبت به نفوسش right. So نفوس کالیفرنیا یا نیویورک یا تکساس زیاد می باشه electoral voting زیادتر می باشه
نمره electoral voting
بله نمرش بلندتر می باشه اگه میخوایی که رئیس جمهور امریکا شوی 270 electoral vote کار داری این حال مثلا یگان نفر در روز انتخابات اگه ببینیم متوجه شدیم در زیر اسکرینتان نشته می باشه که red states سرخ می باشه و blue states آبی می باشه باز در زیر red states اگر مثلا من در نیویورک زندگی میکنم نیویورک هسته همیشه blue state می باشه آبی می باشه باز در زیر نیویورک طور مثال 20 electoral vote برای نیویورک میره باز او 20 میگیرن وقتی که کل نیویورک طور مثال دموکرات vote کردن و او آبی شد باز او را از امو 20 vote toward امو electoral college مثلا ضرب میزنن
معناش نیست که یگان نفر میگه که رای ما هیچ امپکت نداره رای ما حساب نمیشه نه این معنا نداره از خاطر الکترال کالج معنا نداره که رای ما حساب نمیشه رای کلگی حساب میشه و پروسس است
یک پروسس و پروسس را تقسیم میشه با popular vote و با electoral vote و از اون خاطر فکر نکنیم که از خاطر که بعضم امون نمره electoral vote که میآید بعضم از رای خود شما است و از اون خاطر مهم است که بعضم رای فانه بتین Arshan, you mentioned that there was 2 states that do not adhere to. Could you tell us a little bit about what those 2 states are and how that works? اگر اجازه باشه شما گفتین که 2 states است که فرق میکنه از ستای دیگه سیستم electoral voteشان و چی رقم میشه
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. You had asked me. So the states that actually split the electoral college are Maine and Nebraska. There's only 2 states. And so what they do is every other state will give all, if for instance, let's take the state of Virginia. Mas Virginia Austin, I love Virginia. Let's take Virginia. Virginia has a number of electoral vote college votes. I got, for instance, the امسال بین دونالد ترامپ و جو بایدن اگر جو بایدن 51% رای ویرجینیا را بگیره کل electoral college برای جو بایدن میره so all of it goes to them مگر اگر در نبراسکا یا در مین اگر جو بایدن 52% رای بگیره 52% electoral college برش میره so it's not a winner take all.
Got it.
Most states is winner take all, even if it's 51% of the votes that the candidate gets. But Maine and Nebraska are the only ones that split the electoral college so that the candidate gets the college numbers that proportion to the number of votes that they got. So for instance, in Nebraska, if Donald Trump gets 60% of the votes and Joe Biden gets 40%, in those 2 states, they get the numbers based on their the percentage of votes that they got. So it's only 2 states that do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bisata Shakar Aziz. Jawad, this brings me to my next question, which is there seems to be some confusion, at least in the community in which I work in, with regards to mail-in votes and absentee ballots, early voting. یا کمک چون در مورد کرونا هستیم یک کم وره مردم زیاد دقیق نمیفهمن که حال که مکتبا بسته است مثلا یا جایی که وارای میدادن حال فعلا واضح نیست دمیلشان یک چیز میای نمیفهمن چی را میکنن اصول میپرتن sometimes people are receiving things not knowing what it is and they just throw it out. So if you could tell us a little bit about what an absentee ballot is and can we vote right now? What's early voting? That would be great.
Sure. So the first thing to understand is that اولین چیز که باید بفهمیم که در امریکا رای دادن در polling station چی میگره. So polling stations, we have thousands of polling stations. هزارها polling station در امریکا است که میریم ما رای خود میتیم. زیاد وقتی این polling station ها یک مکتب است، های سکول است، جونیور های، میدل سکول، elementary school، یا چرچ است، یا مسجد است، یا سینگاگ است، یا یک کلاب است، جایی که عموما مردم میتونن برن و رای بتن آسانتر رای داده بتونن. Community center ها ایجا است. That is still going to happen this election, and it's important for everyone to understand that the way that we usually vote, that will still happen even with corona. كدي كورونا ومرونام ما لايخدا هذا ميتونين the polling stations. So I want people to know that because I think there's confusion که برما در میل میآید و باید بازور خانه پوری کنیم و پس روان کنیم. Yes, I'll talk about absentee and mail-in voting for a second, but I want to stress ما باید بفهمیم که در November 3rd روز election که آمد ما میتونیم در جایی که هر وقت رای دادیم هنوزم در وقت کرونا تنها که یک ماسک آدم که ماسک بپوشه and you're good to go. That's it. You can go and vote. And we've seen this yesterday actually in places like Virginia. So Virginia started their early voting on-site early voting. So there were lines of 3 hours even because the number of places are smaller because it's early voting, but people wanted to start voting early. So that's very important for people to understand. Okay, I got the mail baraton amu kartarai ballot kemegan ballot baraton bia yani meeton in November 3rd, say November brin right on the amu joy kitayin shida baraton right on a bit. So that's important to understand.
چقدر جالب است که مردم از دلشان به تنگ شده 3 ساعت the line. People are so frustrated and people are so irate. They just want to be done with our situation that they're willing to stand on 3-hour lines. So thank you so much.
I think people are very. I mean, there's a lot at stake with this election. There's so much at stake that we haven't even talked about the Supreme Court. We had a Supreme Court justice, a progressive Supreme Court justice who had pushed so much for women's rights, immigrants' rights, who passed away. And her seat will now be filled. And so there's so many consequences to election. So people are scared and people are excited and people want their voice heard on both sides, but especially within our communities. We've seen our communities, a lot of our community members have supported the Democratic Party more recently. And so they're fearful. They're fearful. Am I going to be sent back home if I'm on a green card and don't have citizenship? Is my family who I wanted to bring to America, are they going to not be able to come here? So there's a lot of fear out there. So that's the first thing, is that you can vote at your local polling station. Please don't get that twisted. You can do that because I think
really important.
I think a lot of people are confused about that, and I think it's important that that's not the case. The second thing, what is a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot? So there's a regular typical voting where we go vote in person. And then there's something called absentee ballot, where you're absent. You're موجود نیستین. یک جای دیگه رایتون میتین. The polling station رای نمیتین. یا در خانه رای میتین. یا the alternate site. یک جایی که براتون تعیین شده که براتون آسان‌تر است. So it's simple. Most absentee ballots are mail-in. So برای سالها اگر یک کسی نتونسته که روز انتخابات برای رای بده as Secretary of State, so there's Secretary of State. Each state has a Secretary of State that focuses on actually implementing the elections. They request a mail-in ballot. So you can request, like this year, I actually requested a mail-in ballot. I will not be in Virginia on the day of the election, so I requested a mail-in ballot so I can vote early and then send it back. So the majority of absentee voting happens through mail-in. If you're outside of the country, if you're not in your state, if you're working and you can't go, you request it and they send it to you. You fill it out. It's a very simple form. Mail-in ballots, it's a very simple form. Self postage and then your vote is counted that way. وميتونن ورد الانترنت on tracking. جات ستيتون ميتونن ك mail-in ballot tracking as the internet. So that can be done. So that is what a mail-in ballot is. The discussion now, as خاطر COVID, is that there are states that want to send everyone ميخوان برای كلگی who's registered to vote, but a citizen که registered to vote, but a كلشان یک ballot روان کنه. So just send it to everyone, even those who have not requested. So most states send it to you only if you request it. But now there are states that want to send everybody a ballot card, so they have a choice. که در خانه و خانه پوری کنن روان کنن یا در روز انتخابات برن در polling station رای بدن. So that's what a mail-in and absentee ballot is. The controversy right now that's in the public and the politics around it is that one party and the president, especially the president, has said that there is a potential for fraud, large amounts of fraud. So he's kind of said he's put doubt in the process. According to all statistics, according to all studies, according to the absolute majority of research around mail-in ballots, it is a complete, safe, and fraud-proof system. There might be one or two things that have happened, but America and Americans have voted mail-in ballots for hundreds of years. وقت the Civil War, وقت جنگ داخلی امریکا بود, people voted through the mail-in ballot, as طرف mail-in ballot رای دادن. Pandemic in 1918, the Spanish flu, مردم از طرف mail-in ballot رای دادن. جنگ جهانی دوم, World War II, مردم از طرف mail-in ballot رای دادن. So mail-in ballots are safe and secure. If you get one, you can fill it out and you can request it in different languages as well and send those back. But I always tell people, as long as you have a mask, November 3rd, be there. If you can do mail-in ballot, if you know it, سرطان فشار نبیاره که ما باید ایرا دهانه بخوایم و بگیرم و خانه پوری کنم بازروان کنم نمیفهم که اگه میرسه در وقت یا نه کلمه اگه سرطان فشار است don't pressure yourself. Mask بپوشین on November 3rd در polling station میتونید رای بدین.
Asma, and make sure that when you show up on November 3rd and you walk out and you have your sticker by I voted, make sure you post it, make sure you
Yes.
encourage other people in your family, your friends, your relatives, make sure everybody knows that hey, like those brave Afghans in Afghanistan who show their finger and
Mhm.
their imprint, make sure you encourage other people to do the same thing. این بسیار انتخابات بازم چندین دفعه تکرار کردیم مهم است اگر در شهری که شما رزیدنسی دارین و مانای ازی که در شهری که شما زندگی میکنین فعلا هستین مثلا من در نیویورک زندگی میکنم و فعلا در نیویورک هستم من میتونم که در تاریخ 3 نوامبر انشالله زندگی باشم همینجا میباشم میتونم که من برم
John, like Sabarton, Megan, you mentioned something. شما یاد کردین درباره افغانا در افغانستان زنهای پیر و مردهای پیر کلکای خود بالا میکنن که ما رای دادیم. And young people, older people, کسایی که سنشان پیش رفته, everyone افتخار میکنن که ما رای میدیم. ما در قطر در دوحه ما در کانفرانس بودم. The conference, it was about the Middle East, درباره شرق الاوسط و افغانستان و پاکستان و I was at a conference. یک آدم سنش پیش رفته بود دیدم یک کاکاجان بود آمده بود در کانفرانس از طرف افغانستان represent میکرد من کلکش دیدم کلکش بالای کلکش بریده شده بود بالای کلکش بریده شده بود و دو کلکش بریده شده بود اما پرسانش کردم گفتم کاکا جان کلکتان چی شده بچیم مرای دادم و طالبا کلک ما بریدن کلک ما را بریدن مگر گفت اگر ارده کلک ما ببرن I will still vote. I will still vote because I want to make sure that my voice is heard. Like if I want to make sure that my daughter's voices are heard. This was what the man told me. And I'll say it again in English fully. When I was at a conference in Doha in Qatar, it was U.S., Middle East, Muslim world engagement. We had representatives from Afghanistan and Pakistan and the whole region, and there was discussions with U.S. Policymakers and lawmakers, and I saw an elder gentleman who was on the delegation from Afghanistan, and he had lost two of his fingers, the top of his fingers, and so we had in conversation. I asked him what happened, and he said that the Taliban they cut his fingers off when they saw that he had voted, because in Afghanistan when you vote you have an ink stain. That's how they tell that you are able to vote, because your fingerprint, your identity. And so he said that I had voted and I was going back home, and they found me and they cut my finger off because I voted in Afghanistan, because I voted in the democratic process. But he said, even if they were to cut off all of my 10 fingers, I will vote again, because I want my voice heard, but I also specifically want my daughter's voices heard. That is what people go through to vote around the world. We don't go through that. There are obstacles in America, but we don't go through that type of an obstacle. And so voting and making sure that because this election is critical, there is so much riding on this election. The future of immigrants, the future of minority communities, the future of our children living in a society where they can be proud of who they are. Right now, the biggest threat, according to law enforcement and the FBI even, the biggest threat to Americans, and especially Americans of minority background, is violent white supremacist groups. And these groups have proliferated. They've become so much more stronger and so much more active in this country as a result of the political environment. And unless we vote and change and push back and speak up, we What I'm afraid of is that we will then face the same type of situation that our parents and grandparents faced when they had to leave Afghanistan because of the political environment. And so, if you care about America, I care deeply about America. Like I said, we all have different identities. I care deeply about America. I want to see an America that's continuing to improve, not that's continuing to go back to what it used to be and to the more sinister and evil nature of our souls.
That was deeply profound, Audishan. I'm trying to like hold back tears. قبل که آرایشان پیشتر گفت خیلی سرم تاثیر کرد پیدا نکردم که آرایشان مفاق میشه اما this story of this gentleman I like the term Kakajan, right? Because these type of heroes that stand up for what they believe in, and me in particular, being a mother of two daughters, it's so incredibly important that what we do as we think about their future at no holds barred, as a parent first before anything else, and as a citizen of this country. I know no other country. I was born and raised in this country. As far as I'm concerned, this is on my birth certificate. It says born and raised in the United States of America. I love being Afghan, and that is my other identity. But it's incredibly important to know that people are willing to again put their lives, their limbs on the line to be able to exercise that right. بعضم اول از مثلا یک مادر دو تا دختر و دو تا سیاست بسیار خیلی مهم است که ما امیر درک کنیم که کاکا جان زندگی خود و ترکای خود دستای خود فدا کرد برای دی که میخواه آینده درخشان برای اولادای خود مخصوصا برای دخترای خود و ما که به مملکت خود میبینیم ایجا خوبی خیلی آسان است ایجا خدای نخواسته از نیست که ما بریم start sharing the polling station. I mean امسال خدا خودش میفهمه که چی گفت میشه. I mean if you look at 2020 honestly we don't know what's going to happen but we're just cross our fingers and hope for the best for what's going to happen.
No, I think the like I said, our situation is so much better, and I don't want to put ourselves in the same situation that Kakagak was in, and that so many people were in. So many people just in Afghanistan have died on election days, trying to express their opinion, and until today, I mean, if you look at I give people, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this example. In Afghanistan, women had a small victory just recently. They were able, we had in Afghanistan, there's a national ID card. Taskere Milis, like there's a national ID card, and usually only name padar yak nafar the national ID card nishta misha. Recently, through activism and through voting and through engagement, through this type of work, they were able to add your mother's name now to the national ID card in Afghanistan. And that, it's a small victory. It's sometimes it's even symbolic, but it's so important. That shows you that people are fighting. And so I don't want to compare us to the challenges that they go through, because their challenges are they face violence and real violence and bombings and suicide bombings in the face of their voting and activism. But we can and we have the ability to, and that's why for me I get so upset when people say, oh, it's all the same, the system's the same, it's never going to change. That's not true, because I've seen the evolution. I've been in Washington, D.C. I went to Washington, D.C. at the end of the Bush administration. I saw it in the Obama administration, and I see it now. There's a big difference. And we don't agree with everyone's policy. And I think the one thing that's important, we are not choosing, when we choose for president or we choose a candidate, we're not choosing a perfect candidate. If we can make our own perfect candidate, that would be great. They believe everything we believe. They stand for everything that we stand. we are choosing imperfect candidates. That is the nature of democracy. ما we're not choosing a saint or وليدة like وليدة ما انتخابنا نکنیم. We're choosing a politician. And so we have to determine how close are they to my opinions and my values and what I stand for, and then I vote for them. That's important to understand about the democratic process.
Absolutely. And just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, before we go on to the next question, I remember I was in high school. I was in this DA kind of law program as a high school student, and one of my teachers said to me, you know, he was of Egyptian American descent, and he pulled me to the side one day. I'll never forget this, and he passed away, so may Allah rest his soul. He put me to the side, and he was like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think I'm going to be an attorney." And he looked at me, and he gave me the thumbs up, and then he gave me the thumbs down, and I was like, "What does that mean?" And he said to me, "Well, you know, there's more to this country than just becoming a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. You need to go into politics. We need to have policy changers in this country." And he went on and on. He explained the system to me, you know, as a 16 or 17-year-old kid. You know, maybe I didn't understand it, but his voice echoes through my mind quite often. And I recall what he was saying and the importance of civic engagement. And for us to, and much respect to all the attorneys and doctors that are out there, but we do need to become more involved. And, you know, we spoke about this earlier with your outstanding bio and all the work that you do for the community. But I think it's incredibly important to encourage that when you're choosing your field, that you make sure that, you know, you're not just kind of doing something that just because, you know, you want to fit into the circle. Remember that there's so many things out there that are just as important. یادم میاد که در های سکول بودم، یک استاد ما بود در یک پروگرام بودم و بر ما آمد، اونا از مصر بودن، گفتن بیا میخوایم فرشتم باید گپ بزنم. گفت مسلمان هستی؟ گفتم بله. گفت کلان که شدی چی میخوایی شد؟ من گفتم وکیل میشم. گفت نه نمیشی. ما گفتم میشه چرا؟ خداوند تعالی ببخشش جنت جایش باشه، بسیار آدم خوب بود. برای من گفت که منتور واره برای ما، برای چندین سال شد. برای من گفت که نه، وکیل داریم، دکتر داریم، انجینیر داریم، تو برو در سیاست خود داخل کن، تو برو در یک رشته بخوان که بتانی که قانونای از این مملکت تغییر بدی، یا بتانی که این سیستم این مملکت ما زندگی ما اینجا نو هستیم، مملکت ما درست است، ما نو اینجا آمدیم، ما هم یک ذره تغییرات بدیم در این سیستم. So anyway, so that brings me into, I know that we're kind of running out of time, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Go TV program. If you want to tell us a little bit about what that is and how we can contribute.
Sure. So the GOTV program is the Get Out the Vote program. So get out the vote. Raya Bekashin Birun. Right on a Birun Bekashin. That's how it would be translated. Get out the vote. And Get Out the Vote programs, the GOTV programs, are done by the campaigns. The campaign is like campaign Vice President Biden or campaign Donald Trump. واردوشان goal campaign است که مردم روز انتخاب یا پیش از روز through mail-in ballots مردم بکشن که برن رای بدن. So get them out of their house. خانه نشینین، کار نشینین. و یک مشکل در امریکا است که روز انتخابات امریکا national holiday نیست. We have to push for that. باید روز انتخابات امریکا national holiday شود که هیچ کس مجبور نباشه کار برن، کسی مجبوریت نداشته باشه کار برن، میتونن که آرام که دی فامیل خود که دی اولادای خود برن رای خود بدن. So that's hopefully, inshallah, that's something that we need to work on. I'm part of campaigns that are pushing for that as well. And so in the future, we can hopefully make that happen. Get out the vote campaigns are those that where if people need rides to polling station, if people need to know how to vote, if people need to know how to fill in a mail-in ballot, campaigns are there to help move people and get them to the polling station to vote. And there's different groups. So we have like a group called Afghan Americans for Joe Biden. And that group is trying to do some get out the vote work. There is South Asians for Biden. There's Arab Americans for Biden. There's Muslim Americans for Biden. I'm sure there's stuff for Trump as well. But there are the ones that I know of. The ones that I know of. I'm not being partisan in any way, but I'm the ones that I know of.
And Indians for Trump, and yeah, right.
I haven't heard about any of them, so if you do, please say. But the ones that I know of are people who represent me and who look like me and who share my values. So there's different groups that have organized to elect Joe Biden, and they get out the vote. So they do, for instance, this year, even though we have COVID, they will be asking Uber drivers to to take people to polling stations if they don't have a ride for free. Taxi drivers do this. Taxi drivers have done this in places like New York and New Jersey and in Washington, D.C., where they will take people for free to go to the polling station to vote and then get back home if they don't have rides. So it is a mechanism. It's a way to get people out. The polling station رای خود بتن اگر موتر نداشته باشن یا اگر طریق میلین بالت صحیح یاد ندارن کمکشان میکنه. So the GOTV efforts is to really get the vote out on that day or days before to make sure people actually vote. Because like I said in the beginning, Americans in general, the America ما صحیح رای خود نمیتیم. تنها 40 تا 45% امریکایا رای میتن. And that's او برای انتخابات رئیس جمهوری است. مگر برای انتخابات های local and state از او که بسیار کم است. So we in general as Americans aren't the best at actually going out and voting. So GOTV efforts are there to get people to leave home and actually go vote.
Absolutely. Okay, so some final words, advice that you want to give the Afghan community regarding this election, anything that you want to sum up with, the floor is yours.
I will repeat what I said before, to quote the great Alhaj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, when he said, people quote him on different things. People quote him about being very, very anti-establishment, but Malcolm X said something that was profound. He said, if you're not around the table, you're on the menu. خذ المنيو أستن. And what does that mean? اگر دولت میز نیستین و درباره خود و خود از خود represent نمیکنین، یک کسی دیگه، یک صدای کسی دیگه عوض صدای شما شنیده میشه. If you're not on the table and you are not engaging at a very strong and substantive level, someone else will speak for you. If you don't vote, and I always tell people this, if you don't vote, especially in states that are critical, وخصوصا state هایی که افغانا have a decent population, مثل Virginia, یا در تکساس, California, New York, or North Carolina, we have a decent sized Afghan American population in those places. اگر شما رای نتین، رای یک کس دیگه دو دفعه حساب میشه. So if you don't vote, someone else's vote is going to count twice. That's just the reality of voting, unfortunately. اگر شما رای نتین، رای یک کس دیگه دو دفعه حساب میشه. That's the reality. And so my request, my humble request is please vote this election. This election will not only determine who's president, but it's going to determine which direction America moves to in the next few years, and will have a major impact on our daily lives, not just American foreign policy. مردم میگن که ما رای بتیم برای رئیس جمهور it's just about foreign policy. نه، این election انتخابات, the outcome of this election is going to impact our daily lives. It's going to impact us, how we live, our standard of living, our safety and security in this country. أمنية ما داير مملكة is dependent on this election. And so this election is the most, I know for me, it is the most impactful and important election of my life. That I know. In my 40 years of living, it is the most impactful of my life. I started voting when I was able to vote. It was George Bush. And after that, George Bush Jr. After that, I voted in every election, but this one is the most important election of my lifetime. So, if we want to make sure that we stay safe and secure, our families, our communities, we need to make sure our voice is heard this election cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arishan, for that. I second that. Absolutely. This is equally the most important election of my entire life as well. بعضم بسیار انتخابات مهم است برای همه ما امسال مخصوصا از سالهای گذشت کده و بازم تشویق میکنیم میتونه که رای بتین نه تنها مثلا آرشان یاد کردن که زندگی روزمره ما مثلا تاثیر داره که برای کی رای میدیم اما یک چیزی که فراموش نکنیم همچنان پالیسی و اما چیزی که در خود کشور ما در خود افغانستان هم پیش میره بسیار مهم است که کی در چوکی میشینه گپه که هم روزمره زندگی ما در اینجا میشه و همچنان در کشور ما افغانستان اردوش یک تاثیر سر اردوش داره so not only Arshan had mentioned that this is going to affect our daily lives but the policy also who's going to sit in that chair is going to say a lot about what happens in Afghanistan and a lot of the cases that I work on and a lot of clients that I have I see how much they're struggling to obtain visas, to obtain the immigration process. I've been in this industry for over a decade. I have never had this much problems and this much red tape that I've had to kind of experience this year. That in the last 4 years than I have in the last decade that I've been doing this. در سالی که مدعی کار هستم و مشتریای هستن ویزا نمیتونن بگیرن کارشان تمام نمیشه وقتا بسیار آسان بود از زیر یک سال 1 2 3 قبول میشد خلاص میشد ایران فکر کنین که immigration policy از این مملکت کجا میره کل از این چیزا را ما نمیگیم که برای کی رای بدین فقط صرف میگیم که کل از این چیزا را زیر نظرتان داشته باشین باز بعد از او انتخاب کنین که برای کی میخواین رای بدین
اگر کس سوال داره میتونن برام زنگ بزنن من میگم ایشان برای کی رای بدن اگر هنوزم کسی سوال داره درباره رای دادن برای کدام کاندیدیت رئیس جمهوریت برای من زنگ بزنن میتونن نمره بر کلگی بدن من برشان میگم که برای کی رای بدن.
On that note, Arishan, there is a number at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to give us a call. At that number, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you look at the bottom of your Facebook Live, you're going to see a section for a chat. Feel free to go ahead and add your comments, your questions, your opinions. We're welcome to it. And we'll answer you. If not right then and there, we'll get back to you. No problem. We're not going anywhere. We're here, or at least I'm here. We'll track down Arishan now. Arishan Khan Yak Jahan Sapas as Omadana Kanimruz Barnomimo. Thank you so much. I know your time is incredibly valued to us. We really appreciate it. We're proud of you. Joy and we wish you very well and very, very success, a lot of success. Sorry, when I go back in different languages, my grammar gets messed up, but we wish you all the success in your career. And thank you so much for your contribution to the Afghan American community at large.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're so welcome. بازم تشکر که امروز پروگرام ما را برنامه ما را در صدای حق تلویزیون شما نگاه کردین. در هر نقاط دنیا که بودین خوش و آرام باشین. روز و شب خوش. خداحافظ شما.